So let's take a look at adding some transactions into Prosperity. This is something that you're definitely going to want to do, and it's how you're going to end up controlling your budget. So what are the available sources of data? Right now, what's encouraged is that you download what are called OFX or QFX files, and they contain a list of transactions, and you can download them online from your different bank accounts. Now, once you have those, it's as easy as just dragging them into Prosperity. So I already have a sample over here on my desktop, so I'm going to click on that OFX file and drag it over here. And when I release, lots of things happen. All right, so what's gone on here? An account has been created. That's because there were no accounts, and Prosperity realizes that the data that's being dragged into the software pertains to a specific account. And any further OFX files that you drag in will automatically be added to that same account for you. Now, it hasn't given it a particularly interesting name, so as you learned before, we can rename this account. So let's call this checking. All right. Now it's set my balance according to the balance that is again stored in that OFX file. And we've created a new tag here, which is a transfer tag to that checking account. I'll talk about that later. Don't concern yourself with it too much. And notice over here inside the transactions area, we now have a bunch of transactions that have taken place. Now in the transactions window, we've got which account the transaction took place in, which in this case is our checking account, which date they took place on, the name for the transaction. So in this case, it will generally be the person that charged you. So for instance, this place seems to be called Nice Restaurant. Any memos that are attached to that, you can also edit these and change them if you wish. This is the tag for a transaction. All transactions, unless you've specifically filtered some of them, which we'll again talk about later, if they don't find a match through any of the filters, they will come in as untagged. So untagged means you have not given a tag to any of these transactions. It's a bit of a blank slate, so you're going to have to assign them yourself. And then amount. Now, a very important thing to remember with Prosperity is that negative amounts, these ones shown in red, are expenses to that account or debits to that account. So anything that's negative here is money that is flowing out of this account. A positive value here, this $500, you'll notice it's in black and it's positive. That implies that, oh, okay, that makes sense. This is a paycheck. So this is money that has come into my checking account, perhaps some automatic deposit from a job or a deposit from a check that you received. So it's very important to remember that flows out are negative and flows in are positive. So that's how you can import transactions. Now, just quickly, let's try to see another way of adding some transactions. So I'm going to create a cash account, add a new account called cash. Now here we have our cash account, and I want to add a transaction. So I'm going to go over to this transactions area here and click add transaction. I do that, and we've created a new transaction here. Now notice the account for this transaction is automatically set to cash because I had a cash account selected in the accounts window here. The date is today, which is Valentine's Day, very romantic day to be recording tutorials. So let's put a name. Let's imagine that I'm out at a nice restaurant. Valentine's meal. That's the name. And for the memo, I'm just going to put Prosperity. And for a tag. Now, tagging transactions we'll get into a bit later, but this, let's say it's a meal, so this should be tagged as food. So I'll double click here and select food. And then for an amount, I'm going to put in, and once again, very important, this is money that I'm imagining I'm spending. So it's a meal, it's a flow out of this account. So let's imagine I spent $50, decent meal. Hit enter, and there we go. So we've created a transaction here. We've added it to our cash account. Notice that since we set an amount of $50, our cash account, which had a balance of $0, is now at negative 50. Let's imagine that we know better. We actually have still $60 in our pocket. So I'm just going to set this account balance back to 60. And there we go. So we've added some transactions by importing, with just dragging a file in. We've also added some transactions manually. We can delete these transactions. So let's say we didn't actually have this meal. I'm going to delete this. I delete that transaction. Now, what's happened, my cash account has now gone up correspondingly because it said, oh, you didn't have that $50 meal, so you actually should have $110 now. And everything adjusts correspondingly. Finally, instead of dragging and dropping OFX files, you can also click this Import Transactions button here. So what that's going to do is open up a little window, and then you just select a folder and highlight any OFX files that you want, and then you're done. So those are the methods of dealing with transactions.